How crazy is this Doha attack? Israel bombs Qatar, one of the closest allies to the U.S. in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, in some ways, hey, it's typical. It's part of a pattern that we've been observing. Decapitation strikes. In this case, an attempted decapitation strike. It appears to have failed, um, and also attacks on negotiators. Anybody who's feigning surprise, how could Israel actually attack the negotiators that are, trying to reach a ceasefire, which should be, of great importance to Israel, certainly is of great importance to the majority of Israeli citizens. Well, this is what Israel's been doing for a long time and has done, this is at least the third occasion I can think of since October 7th. They'd done it prior to that, but there was a Hamas negotiator that was assassinated in Beirut. Okay, there was Hania, we all know, in Tehran. And then there was this. And they did manage, I think, to kill at least one of the negotiators, one of the members of the negotiating team. They were not just negotiators, but they were there specifically to discuss a proposal, that had been put forward by um, President Trump. Trump claimed that the Israelis had completely agreed with it. I saw some statement from Netanyahu, or from his administration that, maybe, maybe not. But anyway, that's the way that Trump was presenting it. And they, um, essentially, Trump said, the ball's in your court. You better agree to this, or there'll be hell to pay. Or words to that effect. He said that just a couple of days ago, a very few days ago, and while they were getting together in Qatar, which is a place where they have an office, and it was an office that was actually established at the request of the U.S. Right there in Qatar, Israel attacked and fired 10 missiles, from that struck this building. I believe they killed a total of 5 people. I think including the son of one of the senior Hamas officials, a negotiator, two Qatari security officials, and then a fifth person whose identity escapes me right now. But immediately afterwards, the IDF claimed that they had actually wiped out the entire Hamas political leadership there in Qatar. But that appears not to be true. Later the denial started to come in from different news sources. So it appears that they failed to do that. But they did strike the offices. They did kill at least one of the negotiators and a son of another. Now, for this to have occurred, there simply had to be coordination with the U.S. And there was Israeli officials have actually come out and said that. Netanyahu himself denied it. He made some sort of statement, this was entirely our doing, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just not believable. It's not possible that they did it without U.S. approval and actual coordination. The planes had to fly across Jordanian, Syrian, Iraqi, and I believe Saudi Arabian airspace.
Were they refueled?
And they were, according to, at least there was, there are these different platforms that keep track of different planes around the world. And they actually, this platform identified a British air refueling, tanker that took off shortly, before the airplanes arrived there, and then circled in the area just prior to the attack. So it looks like, the British were involved too, and they were refueled. And then again, this, Doha, where the office was, the capital of Qatar, is only 19 miles from a major U.S. air base. And so just don't tell me, it's just not possible that the Israelis did it. Now
You mean the U.S. didn't know?
The U.S. didn't know, and that the Israelis, and that the U.S.
Right.
more than that coordinated with this. They just had to. There was no air defense was activated. They had to you had to inform all these nations that, okay, these planes are going to be traveling through your airspace, et cetera, et cetera. This was a multinational project, and the British, apparently were involved as well. Now, there was a report that came out in the Wall Street Journal that said that it was also approved by Qatar itself. And now the emir there has vociferously, denied that, has denounced the Israeli attack and said they didn't get any warning until the attack had already begun. He described it as treacherous, and the U.S. role was treacherous too. It seemed like, very, very heated and, to all appearances, a sincere denial. But I strongly suspect that they did, like the Wall Street Journal said, they did in fact approve of this. I don't think it's possible that they could not, that as an Israeli journalist pointed out, it's just not, again, believable that the U.S. would carry this out or allow this, work with Israel to carry this out without getting Qatari approval, because, the U.S. has a lot invested in Qatar. They have that huge air base, the Al Udeid air base, very close to Doha, a major air base with thousands of personnel on it. And of course, Qatar is one of those Gulf states that committed to huge amounts of investment in the U.S., I think $1.4 trillion. And they had just recently, committed specifically to upgrading that airbase, to the tune of $1.8 billion. They did that like 6 weeks ago. I mean, Qatar is a very important ally of the U.S., and I just do not believe that they would have risked that relationship. Now, we'll see. If, their words are cheap, and I think like the emir has to pretend like he's outraged, just because, again, he has to take into account popular sentiment in the region. But if he doesn't do anything, and like they go ahead with the upgrade and the air base stays there and everything, I think we can know that, yeah, this was prearranged and Qatar was part of that arrangement.
It's hard to believe that Qatar could be part of it. How could you allow an attack on your own country? Like, what benefit why would they do that? Just because they're afraid of the United States, or there's just some influence?
There may have been some bargaining. Okay, yeah, we don't want to do this, but if you promise to do this for us or whatever, who knows what happened behind closed doors. Again, there were 2 Qatari security officials that were killed, but it was an attack on Hamas. And there had been signs that, like, Qatar had been more or less supportive of Hamas in the past, had been, in fact, a supporter, but that they were beginning to sour on them and beginning to pressure them to simply to cave in. So it may decide, well, these guys are just a nuisance now. We want to get rid of them. The Israelis have come forward with this plan to get rid of them. Let's just let it happen and then pretend like we're outraged. I
don't know.
That's really despicable.
It's hard to believe for me. I don't.
I unfortunately, I can believe it. I just, we talk a lot of, the genocidal Israelis and the complicit Americans, but part of the reason, as we pointed out too, is that you have these really two-faced, despicable, Arab leaders who obviously just don't give a damn about the genocide and, really even the interests of, of the Arabs or the Muslims or anything like that. It's about their own wealth, power.
But I mean, you're putting so much at risk. Like you said, this is the largest U.S. air base in the region. Al Udeid Air Base has over 10,000 personnel on it. Qatar, the emir just gifted Trump a $400 million luxury Boeing jet. They just agreed to a $1.5 trillion investment deal. This is, and it's clear that Trump really likes Qatar. He likes the Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. We saw him on that tour. He loved it. All smiles. They made him feel like a king, a prince. It feels like this relationship was supposed to be solid.
Right.
And
well, maybe it is. That's what I'm saying, that it is. And it was just something they worked out between them.
But I mean, what would be the advantage for the United States or Qatar? It's only for Israel, right? It's only what Israel wants, and even then, it's like, well, how does this really advance Israel's goal and position, anyways?
I think it clearly what it does is it advances Netanyahu's, because we just talked about it. I think in the last episode we got into this. He just said, okay, the majority of Israeli society wants a ceasefire. But Netanyahu doesn't. It's a really problematic for him. Again, his coalition can fall apart. And so he's been fighting it, but he's under a lot of pressure. Again, the majority of voters do not want to see the ceasefire. So, what do? You go after the negotiators. You kill them. And now one
Right,
thing
but
is like Qatar has now declared that they're no longer going to be mediate, ceasefire talks.
right, but I mean, I'm talking about the U.S. and Qatar themselves. Like, why
Yeah.
would they
Okay. Well,
put them?
the U.S., we know, unfortunately, it's just, it's the power of the Zionists within the U.S. It is not, I agree, it's not in the U.S. interest. But that's why I think Qatar must have agreed to it, because the U.S. would not risk that relationship. So they had to make sure, okay, because Qatar, this is what they're thinking about. Can you go along with this? We'll cover for you or whatever. And maybe we're going to sweeten some deal that we had on the table earlier. I think it's clear. I don't think the U.S. would have risked it. They probably, like the first time the Israelis brought it up, they say, hey, we can't do that. And then the Israelis, they have a lot of contacts. This is the weird thing, too, is that they actually have a lot of contacts with Qatar. There's, in fact, some scandals going on right now about, aides of Netanyahu that had these deals in very close relationship with Qatari government officials after October 7th. So, the Israelis, they say, hey, we get the sense that Qatar actually is kind of sick of Hamas and wants to get rid of them. They might be willing to go along with this. But we have to make sure to pretend that they're not part of it. And I think that's what happened. I mean, really, again,
Really?
we'll see if Qatar actually does something substantive, closes the base, that would be huge. Then we say, okay, yeah, they were not informed. And that would just be like just a monumental error on the part of the U.S. I mean, I think it's an error anyway, but it's just, I doubt that they were willing to risk their relationship with Qatar. So I think that there was something worked out ahead of time.
Okay, yeah, we'll see. I mean, the only way, I guess we'll just have to see the way the Qatar responds, like you said. If they do close the airbase, because they said, we reserve the right to retaliate. And I was like, oh boy, could this actually happen? And there's kind of just a call, like, for all countries in the Middle East that we need to band together. I mean, Israel's bombed a half dozen countries in a week. It's insane. Right. It's just so out of control.
Yeah,
and
including
I just,
Tunisia, North Africa.
Right. So it's just, they're spanning multiple continents now. It's like, how far will they go? Somebody has to stop them. And I was thinking that maybe this would be the part where we start to push things over the edge. But you feel like Qatar, the emir, is complicit in this, the government as well. And it's just, the corruption runs so deep. It's so rotten.
Right, but it still is shocking. I think, there were a lot of condemnations from European countries, and I think they were probably real. I don't think they like this, and it is yet another red line that Israel has crossed. They've done these decapitation strikes, but this is the first time in a neutral country that they've actually carried one out, and so that's just another further proof of increasing recklessness on the part of the Israelis. They just seem to, they won't recognize any boundaries.
But won't the people of Qatar, and you think the region, isn't their blood boiling? Don't they want, I mean, there were more Qataris killed than Palestinians, than Hamas, negotiators. So aren't they upset? This was, you just bombed their capital. Yeah. Like, imagine if Washington D.C. just got rocked by a missile. How crazy that would be. I mean, Doha is
right.
a big capital.
Again, one thing is like these Persian Gulf states, they're extremely wealthy, and in a way, I think like the actual citizens of the state tend to be sort of part of the ruling class. They enjoy the riches, and then you have almost not exactly a slave class, but just imported laborers that actually do the work in these countries. That take out the trash. That pick up the trash and clean the rooms and serve food in the restaurants and so on. It's not actually, and those people are just powerless. So. Yeah, I don't know that there's really any risk of some sort of uprising within Qatar. There'd just be a great deal of anger in the region, I think, clearly. But
Well, okay,
So
here's just another thing. Just the does I know the U.S. It offers security guarantees to like half the globe, like 50 nations have some type of security arrangement with the United States. I thought Qatar did as well, and that's part of the reason they have that base is for the
yeah,
protection. Plus, they have all this
right,
military equipment, all the Patriots, all these things. Like
yeah,
you have
and none of them were
outsourced.
activated. Right.
Right. So like what is this security guarantee if a nation like Israel can just bomb you and not everything
Yeah.
gets shut down? That's a
Right.
huge question, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
everybody's around the globe is like, why weren't these activated? Were they shut down by the US? Or who's operating them? Was there an order given? I mean, do they not work? I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
well,
Well,
what's the point of having the US guarantee your security if they don't protect you?
Yeah. Well, Trump came out with a statement. It was really a wishy-washy sort of statement. Like he did not
let me-
approve of this. You can
Yeah,
maybe you have it.
I have parts of it, and because I was wanting to address it because it is an interesting statement. It's weird how he kind of goes all over. So, actually, I think this was from Caroline Levitt during the press conference.
Okay, but he said something very similar to what she said. Yeah.
Right. It said this morning the Trump administration was notified by the United States military, so the U.S. military notified them, that Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. But, okay, eliminating Hamas is a worthy goal, and this incident could be an opportunity for peace, is what they say. It's so crazy. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack. Oops, sorry, it's just a bad location. But it's strange because he said notified by the U.S. military. It's almost like Trump is saying we didn't know. And part of me is like, maybe that's the case. Like Israel just does stuff, and the military and the CIA and Mossad are kind of all one, and they operate. And we saw this in his first term with Syria. He said to withdraw, and the Pentagon general said, "We just do our own thing. We just ignore them." So they begin this activity, and then Trump learns with it, and then he just sort of does what he always does, which is just free ball it while it's happening.
Yeah. I believe he did give an approval to this. He had knowledge, beforehand.
What a scumbag! It's
Yeah,
crazy.
but he was, this has been the case for the last few months at least. That he's giving unconditional support to the Israeli government, to whatever they want to do, and so this is not a surprise. And again, this is something. It's not. This was something that was coordinated. Like again, the planes flew over several nations. All those nations had to be, informed ahead of time, and there had to be handovers, and there was the RAF tanker. This was something that was planned.
Let's see if that's
and
confirmed.
The US
If the RAF is confirmed. I did see that on somewhere on X,
Right.
but like I'm not. I don't know how.
Right. Well, I kind of I remember there was something similar, like in the case of the Bulgarian. There are these unofficial tracking groups because the data is out there and they collate it and they provide the maps. And it turned out what they said about the plane over Bulgaria with von der Leyen on it, they proved that she was lying, and the Bulgarian government actually backed it up. They said, yeah. So their track record has been good. I can think of other instances where they, but I don't. But you're right, it isn't confirmed. So let's kind of push that to the side. I wouldn't be surprised at all, but it's hard to believe that they just made it up. But let's wait till it's confirmed. But even absent the any involvement by the RAF, we just know these other countries had to be involved, and I think the U.S. simply had to be involved too.
That's nuts. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is 4 times now that Trump has used the pretext of negotiations to carry out some type of heinous assassination or decapitation strike.
Or to allow the Israelis to do it. Right. I can think of 3 at least, but maybe there's a 4th.
Well, okay, so this is what I'm thinking. There's Soleimani in his first term, where he was lured to Baghdad for my understanding, what he was supposed to go. He was
engaged in peace talks, right?
Engaged in peace talks in Baghdad, and that's when they killed him. So Soleimani, there's Nasrallah. I had a clip that I played when that first happened, where they're talking to the reporter saying, "Yeah, there was this peace deal that you guys were signing to end the
Or
the invasion
offer, right?
ceasefire officer in southern Lebanon." And that's why Nasrallah moved to a more open location, and they killed him. And then, of course, the most famous one is the Red Wedding attack in Iran, the real heinous one we're engaged, and now this one. So that's four under Trump. It's
Right.
like
Yeah,
you can't.
that's true. That's
Right. So and then on top of that, you have Israel carrying out decapitation strikes. Striking a consulate in Syria. Killing the Yemeni prime minister and his cabinet in Yemen just a couple weeks ago. Now the U.S. is talking about the potential decapitation strikes against Maduro. It's just like this is there's no semblance of engaging in any type of rules of war, international order anymore, any rules. It's just a free for all now. It feels like.
right. Yeah, well, that's the thing that I think Trump has done. If you want to say one service that he's provided, is that he's ripped the mask off. The rules-based international order was always phony, but maybe not entirely so. There were we sometimes observed the rules and made an effort to appear to observe certain rules, to be within, to comply with international law. Though, when it suited us. And then when we broke, the rules or we violated international law, there was always an excuse, it often using the language of human rights or something like that. So by doing that, it was false. But there actually were certain constraints. There was an effort to at least keep up the appearance. But now that's gone. It kind of reminds me again of there was a very important, I can't remember the emperor, but after the fall of the Republic, the Roman Republic, that actually a lot of the institutions of the Republic remained, but they just were, especially over time, they just were stripped of all, of any real authority or power. But still, there's this pretense. We have senators, and they get together, and they rubber stamp what the emperor says, and then it's one emperor just forget about this. What's this? What's the point of this? And Trump is kind of like that emperor, and in a way, he's done us a service. Again, it's not the Department of Defense; it's the Department of War. Yeah, well, that's true. There hasn't been really a defense aspect to almost anything we've done for a long, long time. It is all about war. So. Yeah, it's
where's the pushback then? Like if the mask is off and everybody sees that this is, there is no rules-based international order. It's just that Israel and the United States can kill whoever they want, bomb whoever they want, and there's no repercussions. With the backdrop of a genocide being live streamed to us from Gaza, like. We were talking about this in the last episode. When is it going to reach a boiling point or breaking point? It's just like I feel like there has to be a reaction. It's just such a slow moving.
Yeah.
I know public opinion has changed, and there's some sanctions and talk about recognizing Palestine as a state, but let's see some real pushback.
Right. Well, I think the shifts in public opinion are very significant, but it takes years, maybe even decades, for that to play out. I think eventually we will, but again, we're talking mainly about the younger generation, but all the institutions are, firmly in the Zionist camp, and they're just not going to change in the short run, and maybe not the medium term either. Regionally, again, we have these very corrupt Arab leaders, unfortunately. There's a lot of anger among the people. But that's just not reflected. Again, it's somewhat analogous to what we're talking about in Western Europe. There is anger among the people, and there are real protests. And some people are really putting their freedom on the line anyway, like in Britain, where they're going out and holding signs showing, that they support, Palestinian action.
Yeah,
roughed up and thrown in jail.
That's crazy. I've been seeing the videos of that. It's nuts. They say they're terrorists, but he's saying, just saying I support Palestine action, and the genocide, like, oh, you're a terrorist. And they're grabbing 80-year-old people in wheelchairs and arresting them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just what we're going to say. And I think eventually something will crack. But again, as long as the institutions are firmly under Zionist control, and they are. It's just it can go on for a while like this, and I don't think it can go on forever. It can't go on forever. It can't go on for I think more than another generation at the most. But and that's pushing it. Maybe it'll be much sooner than that. I certainly hope so. But certainly in the short term, I don't think we can expect to see any change. And regionally, it's the same thing. You have these very corrupt leaders in the Arab world, unfortunately. Again, it may be there was some point where they just cracks. When people have been pointing to Egypt, I think the Egyptian authorities, yeah, they've been very corrupt. They've been complicit in a lot of ways. They have this deal with Israel, that goes back to the Anwar Sadat and that deal between Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. Way back in the, was it actually the 1970s? I believe it was. But it's under strain. The Israelis are violating it. The Israelis want, I think, to push, and they may actually attempt to just push the surviving Gazans into Egyptian territory. And the Egyptians do have a real army, funded by the U.S., so it can't fight for very long because the U.S. has control over the parts and the maintenance and all that. But they can actually fight for a while. And I think there's a lot of anger in Egypt, and there have been, a certain amount of civil disobedience in support of the Palestinians there. And you have a regime that is trying to keep that under control, but at the same time is itself, increasingly, angry at the Israeli government. And something could blow there, but who knows? Who knows? These things are very hard to predict. It's just really globally, it's where we see the biggest consequences. The SCO and BRICS, and the change in orientation of India and so on. That's all very significant, but that's not within the region, and unfortunately, it doesn't. At least at this point, it's not going to be a direct help to the Gazans.
So you don't expect there to be any real huge fallout from this, the attack on Doha, or do you think there might be some lip service, but Qatar is involved and they're going to just not do anything and nothing happens? And
I'm afraid so. It's just like it's shocking, and I think it's even shocking for like a lot of the Europeans, and it is just a kind of another demonstration of what Israel has become. And it's just part of this process of, it's contribute to this process of just waking up the world to the real insanity of and genocidal nature of this regime in Israel. But it's just one other milestone among other milestones, on this.
Well, I hope you're wrong. I mean, I do too. Maybe it's because I've been waiting for almost 2 years now, ever since October 7th, and seeing what's been unfolding before our eyes. Is okay, who's going to stop this? When is there going to be an uprising, a breaking point? And just seeing it, and also just it's just crazy to me that the amount of Zionist control over Western institutions has been made so apparent that even people that don't care about foreign policy and what's going on in the Middle East, they're aware there's something wrong here, and it's just so apparent now. And it's just the elephant's there in the room, and we just keep on dancing around it. It's like we all know what's going on here.